The sky above Trade Moon Delta was a soft gray, with silver clouds floating like smoke. The moon was quiet. It was where many came to trade food, water, machines, and metals. It didn't matter what planet you were from. People came here to buy and sell without fear. The place was safe, or so everyone thought. One cold morning, everything changed. 10 humans had just finished a simple deal. They had traded water purifiers for food cubes and small fuel cells. They were peaceful people, farmers, builders, tech workers, and one old nurse who still carried a small first aid kit in her coat. They were not soldiers. They did not carry weapons. They had done nothing wrong. They were just trying to help their colonies survive. But then, out of nowhere, a black ship covered the sky. It made no sound, but it blocked the sun and cast a long shadow across the trading post. The traders looked up. Their hands froze in midair. A low hum filled the air like a growl under the surface. That ship belonged to the Zark's dominion. The Zarks were not like humans. Their skin was hard like stone, and their eyes were yellow with no pupils. Their voices were deep and sharp, and their armor made them look even larger than they were. The Zarks said they kept the galaxy in order, but many feared them. Not because they brought peace, but because they brought silence. The ship opened its doors. Hundreds of Zark's soldiers marched out in straight lines. Their boots slammed against the ground like thunder. They did not speak to anyone. They pointed to the humans. They grabbed the 10 without warning. "Spies," said the leader of the group, his voice cold like steel. "Take them." One of the humans, a young man named Milo, tried to speak. "We're not spies. We're just traders. You can check our cargo." He didn't finish. A soldier hit him in the stomach and he fell to the ground. The others tried to help, but the Zark's soldiers raised their stun rods. The crowd watching didn't move. Everyone stood still. Even those who knew the humans said nothing. The Zarks were feared everywhere. There was no trial. No one came to ask questions. The Zarks didn't allow it. They said the humans would be questioned elsewhere, but they never said where. No cameras were allowed. No messages got out. The Zarks shut down the local comms tower and jammed every ship within reach. The humans were never seen again. Word spread fast among the traders, but few wanted to speak openly. The Zarks had ears in every system, on every moon, in every hub. One wrong word could bring a black ship to your door, so people whispered. They told each other quietly. The Zarks took 10 humans. No reason, no warning, gone. The Zarks thought it would be easy. They thought no one would care. Humans were still considered a young species by many. Some called them weak. Others called them noisy. Many just ignored them. The galaxy was large. Most didn't think much about Earth. But this time, someone was watching. A merchant from Jupiter saw it happen. He was a quiet man known for selling maps. He had worked with the humans once. He had even been saved by one of them during a fuel fire. When he saw them taken, he recorded a short clip, just a few seconds. Then he shut off his device and slipped away. Later, in a hidden port far from the trade moon, he uploaded the clip. It showed the Zark's ship landing. It showed the humans being taken. And most of all, it showed the crowd standing still, silent, too scared to move. The video spread slowly at first, through small networks, private links, backdoor channels, but Earth saw it, and when they saw it, they didn't forget. On Earth, things were quiet on the surface. News stations didn't report it, governments said nothing. But deep underground, in bunkers and labs and secret war rooms, people were watching. They watched the clip over and over. They wrote down the names of the 10. They searched for clues. They looked at trade logs. They tracked flight paths, and they remembered every face. The leaders of Earth didn't speak to the Zarks. Not yet. They didn't send warnings or threats. They didn't ask for answers. They just waited. The Zarks believed the moment was over. To them, it was just another message to the galaxy. They ruled by fear. They controlled by silence. They thought humans were just another group to step over. But Earth was listening. On Mars, a scientist named Dr. Eleonora Blue watched the video and went pale. One of the missing humans was her nephew. On Europa, a quiet man named Commander Jace Thorne watched the footage with shaking fists. His sister had been taken. In the asteroid belt, a small mining crew stopped their drills. They knew one of the missing men. He had shared rations with them during a bad year. They didn't forget his kindness. And on Earth itself, an old woman in a wheelchair watched the clip in silence. Her granddaughter had been the nurse with the first aid kit. The woman's eyes didn't blink once. She turned to her caretaker and said 4 words, "Tell them to prepare." The galaxy was busy. Stars exploded. Planets turned. Empires rose and fell. But in small corners of that vast sky, people began to whisper again. Only this time they whispered for a different reason. They whispered because they had seen something they couldn't forget. They whispered because Earth was too quiet. No anger, no protests, no news. Just silence. But it was not the silence of fear. It was the silence before a storm. Back in Zark's territory, the generals laughed. They made jokes about weak humans. They watched the clip too, but only to count how many had watched in fear. They didn't worry. Earth had never fought the Zarks. Humans traded and talked, but they didn't strike. They didn't plan. At least, that's what the Zarks believed. In the deep parts of their empire, the Zarks continued their rule. They sent out more black ships. They gathered more workers. They didn't notice that small things were changing, that one cargo ship did arrive, that a station didn't respond, that a trader who once worked for them now refused their calls. The Zarks didn't see it yet, but the humans were already moving. The 10 who vanished would never be forgotten. Each one had left something behind: a child, a friend, a letter, a last message. Those memories spread through Earth's many colonies like fire on dry grass. It wasn't about the 10 anymore. It was about what the Zarks had done, the line they had crossed. People who had never met each other now spoke the same words. They will pay. In schools, teachers told students to look up the trade moon delta. On farms, workers built hidden rooms under their homes. On ships, captains checked their logs twice. And in every human base, no matter how far, the same signal was passed: prepare quietly. Remember the 10. The Zarks had made a mistake, a deep one. They thought taking 10 humans would scare the rest. But instead, they woke a sleeping world. Now Earth was watching. And Earth never forgets. They were more than names, more than numbers, more than just 10 humans taken on Trade Moon Delta. Each one had a story. Each one had people who loved them, and each one mattered. The first was named Liana. She was only 21, but she had already built her own farm on a floating island above Venus. Liana had soft brown eyes and a quiet voice. She worked with her hands and smiled when she shared food with others. She was the kind of person who believed in helping first and asking questions later. What most people didn't know was that Liana was the niece of Earth's top science leader, Dr. Eleonora Blue. Dr. Blue didn't show her feelings often, but when she saw the video of her niece being taken, she didn't cry. She stood up, walked into her lab and locked the door behind her. Next was Aaron. He worked with machines. His job was fixing small tech devices in orbit around Saturn. He didn't talk much, but he was known for being fast, smart, and loyal. Aaron had a younger brother who was a pilot for Earth's Space Defense Group. That pilot, Commander Jace Thorne, was calm and steady in battle. But when he found out his brother was missing, something in him changed. He sent only 2 words to his crew: "We start." Then there was Dana. She had white hair, though she wasn't old. A strange starstorm had changed her hair color when she was a child. Dana was kind. She traveled to colonies and helped people grow food in places where soil was poor and water was low. She had friends everywhere, on moons, asteroids, and even deep-sea platforms. Dana had no children, but she had taught hundreds of kids how to plant, water, and hope. One of those kids had grown up to become Earth's top trade diplomat. He had always said, "I owe everything to Dana." When he saw her in the clip, he canceled all his meetings and disappeared from public sight. Another taken was Bashir. He was a singer. His songs were full of warmth and light. He sang in many languages, old Earth tongues and new ones made in the stars. Bashir believed that music could bring peace. His voice had calmed riots and quieted battles. People called him the Star Voice. What few knew was that Bashir's father was part of the United Galactic Council. The father had tried to keep his distance from war. But when he heard that his son had been taken by the Zarks, the mask of peace cracked. Number 5 was a nurse named Mari. She was older than the others, with wrinkles around her eyes and a scar across her cheek from an old spacequake. Mari had served in 3 major rescue missions and saved hundreds of lives. She carried a red first aid pack everywhere she went. When the Zarks grabbed her on the moon, she was treating a child for burns. That child ran to find help, but no one dared speak up. Mari had no children of her own but her cousin. An intelligence chief deep within Earth's command called her "my compass." When the clip of her capture appeared, that chief didn't sleep for 3 nights. Then, quietly, they sent out 12 special agents. The 6th human was Theo. He had once been in the military, but he had retired and gone to live on a small ice moon. There, he built machines to keep the ice from melting too fast. Theo believed in balance between machines and nature, between people and peace. He had fought in one war long ago and had promised never to pick up a weapon again. But Theo had a daughter, Serena Thorne, who was now a senior fleet captain. When she saw her father being dragged away, she didn't call for backup. She called for silence, and she began to move her ships into quiet formation. Number 7 was Jin. She was blind but could hear the smallest sound in a crowd of thousands. Jin designed echo maps for dark places where no light worked. Her maps saved lives in tunnels and mines. She lived alone, but she shared her tech freely. The person who loved her most was a coder named Pax, who ran one of Earth's hidden data rings. Pax had no rank, no badge, but he could enter any system, unlock any gate, and erase any record. When he learned Jin had vanished, he erased 3 Zark's listening posts before the day ended. The 8th was Sam, just Sam. He had no last name, no titles. He drifted from planet to planet fixing ships for fuel. Most people thought he was nobody, just a worker. But Sam had been one of the first Mars settlers. He had helped build the oxygen towers. He had once repaired a broken dome during a dust storm and saved over 100 lives. People in the outer colonies called him the Quiet Fix. What most never guessed was that Sam's best friend was Earth's Mars governor. That governor kept his face still when he saw the video, but his heart burned. The 9th was a girl named Aya. She was only 16. She wasn't even supposed to be on the trade moon. She had traveled with her older brother to deliver parts for a broken farming drone. Aya had always loved stars. She painted them on everything, her coat, her boots, her bags. Her mother was a writer who had told stories across the stars. Her father had died years ago in a factory fire on Titan, saving his workers. Her brother was taken too, but Aya was the one everyone remembered. Because in the video, as the Zarks dragged her away, she looked straight into the camera. Her eyes were full of fire, full of hope. And the 10th was the one who changed everything. His name was Ravi. He was thin, fragile, walked with a limp. He had been born during a blackout on an old colony ship. His bones were weak and he needed a cane to walk, but Ravi was sharp. He remembered everything he read, everything he saw, every word spoken around him. Ravi fixed communication lines by listening to noise and finding patterns. The Zarks had laughed at him when they took him, called him soft, called him broken. What they didn't know was that Ravi had once stopped a war with a whisper. Ravi's sister was the head of Earth's deep core security. She was silent, serious, and feared by many. She rarely smiled. When she watched the video of her brother being mocked by the Zark's general, her hands didn't move. Her breath didn't change. But the very next day, several Zark's patrols vanished without a trace, and her team began working around the clock. These 10 were not strangers. They were not just names on a list. They were tied to leaders, builders, thinkers, and fighters. Each one had a connection, and each one had someone who would not rest until justice was done. Across Earth and its colonies, those connections turned into action. A singer wrote a song called The 10. It spread faster than any message. A group of children in orbit school started a project to collect stories from the missing. A quiet mechanic on Pluto carved each name into a steel plate and placed it by the main fuel station. A priest on Ceres said their names every night before his final prayer. On military bases, their names were added to mission boards. On hidden screens, blinking dots appeared, one for each friend, each sibling, each person willing to rise. The Zarks didn't understand what they had done. To them, the humans were just tools to scare others. But they didn't just harm strangers. They touched the hearts of people who had power, people who had reach, people who had lost, and people who were ready to act. In every corner of Earth's reach, something had begun. It wasn't a war yet. It wasn't an army. Not yet. But it was something stronger than fear. It was love. It was memory. It was a promise made in silence. We will not forget. We will not forgive. And we will not stop. The galaxy didn't know it yet, but those 10 humans, Liana, Aaron, Dana, Bashir, Mari, Theo, Jin, Sam, Aya, and Ravi, had become the spark. And the fire was coming. At first there was silence. The leaders of Earth didn't give speeches. They didn't wave flags. There were no loud messages, no shouting, no promises of war. There was only a quiet change, like the first breeze before a storm. Then something strange happened. One of the Zark's patrol ships, which circled the moons of Jupiter, suddenly went missing. It had no known enemies nearby. It had a full crew. The ship was strong and its path was clear. But one morning it simply didn't report in. Its signal was gone. No wreckage, no call for help, just silence. The Zark's leaders thought it was a mistake. Maybe it was just a system crash or a broken radio. They sent out a few scouts to check. The scouts found nothing. 2 days later, a supply station on the outer belt went dark. This station didn't hold weapons. It carried food, water, and spare parts. It served over 30 Zark's patrol groups. When the workers arrived, the gates were open. The power was down. Every shelf was empty. The cameras had been erased. On the floor was a small mark, just a symbol. It was not a word. It was not in any known language, but somehow it looked human. Now the Zarks were confused. They still didn't worry. They still thought they were in control. After all, they ruled half the galaxy. They had hundreds of ships, thousands of soldiers, and many planets under their thumb. They didn't fear humans. They thought Earth was weak, soft, slow to move. But they didn't understand Earth at all. Somewhere deep in the mining rings, a worker named Rhea found a Zark's drone hidden in her tool shed. It was a spying machine watching her team. She didn't call the guards. She didn't scream. She picked it up, opened the panel, and placed a small device inside. Then she closed it gently and left it where it was. 3 days later, that same drone flew into a Zark's base and exploded, not with fire but with light. The light froze every machine for 30 seconds. During that short pause, all files in the base were copied and sent away. When the systems came back on, nothing seemed wrong, until the Zarks realized their plans were missing. Elsewhere, a crew of young pilots in the rings of Saturn slowed down a Zark's shuttle. They didn't shoot. They didn't break anything. They simply took control of the engines using a code the Zarks didn't know humans had. They parked the shuttle in a hidden dock and left. By the time the Zarks found it, the crew had disappeared, but the ship's logs had been wiped, and one word had been carved into the wall: remember. Small acts, quiet steps, that's how it began. Not all humans had weapons. Most didn't. But they had other tools, ideas, plans, machines, and memories. They remembered the 10 who had been taken. They remembered every face, every voice. They remembered how it felt to watch those videos, how it felt to do nothing, and they didn't want to feel that way again. So they acted. In the old libraries of Mars, a student wrote a code that could stop Zark scanners for 10 seconds. He sent it out in a public forum. It spread quickly. In less than a week, people in the shadows were using it to slip past sensors, enter ships, and gather secrets. No one knew the student's name. He didn't want fame. He only wrote one line on the message: for Liana. On Titan, a group of farmers who had never fought before started training in the dark. They didn't want revenge, they wanted safety. They knew the Zarks wouldn't stop, so they made a plan to protect each other. They shared tools, taught each other to hide signals, and built underground paths between their homes. When someone asked why, one of them answered, "Because they took Dana, and we won't let them take anyone else." In Earth's digital zones, hackers began to watch Zark's accounts. They didn't steal. Not yet, but they followed every move. They read every trade. They tracked every shift in power. Slowly, quietly, they started to learn the enemy's shape, how it breathed, how it moved. Like learning the steps of a giant before throwing a stone. And then came the story of Station K-49. Station was small. It floated near the dark edge of a dead star, barely used. Mostly robots worked there. But one day the robots stopped. The Zarks sent engineers to fix the systems. The engineers didn't return. A message was found hours later, carved into metal near the docking bay. "We are not lost. We are waiting." No name, no sound, just a warning. The Zarks started to get nervous. They still believed they were stronger, but they began to feel something strange, confusion. Things were not going their way. Plans were breaking, ships were vanishing, machines were freezing, people were whispering. On Earth, nothing was said on the news. No official reports were shared. But across every colony, humans started to walk a little taller. They looked each other in the eye. They shared quiet glances that meant, "We know what's happening, and we're with you." On a floating school near Neptune, a teacher wrote 10 names on the board and asked her students, "Who will stand for them?" Every child raised their hand. Revenge was not a loud thing. It did not come like thunder. It came like rain, one drop at a time. Quiet, steady, sure. In the deep deserts of Mars, a young girl made a sculpture out of red stone. It showed a human hand gripping a Zark's chain and breaking it in two. She placed it near the spaceport where every ship could see it. The Zark's patrol removed it. The next day, 2 more were built. On Earth's oceans, old ships that had been shut down began to sail again, silently, without lights. They carried people who had once fought in wars, people who had promised never to fight again, but now they felt something pulling them back. Not hate, not anger, duty. In hidden halls, leaders who had once disagreed began to meet. They did not trust each other, but they trusted the cause. They agreed on one thing: the Zarks had gone too far. But the humans didn't send demands. They didn't declare war. They just kept moving step by step. One code, one whisper, one mission at a time. In the cold moons, someone found a Zark's training file. It had data on every colony, every human base, every weakness. Someone had stolen it. No one claimed credit, but the file was sent to every major Earth group within an hour. No one asked where it came from. They just read it and remembered. In the forests of Europa, a group of engineers built something new. A drone that looked like a bird, sang like a song, and carried tools instead of weapons. It could fly past guards, past gates, and reach places no human could. It became the eyes of the hidden fighters. People called it the silent wing. More Zark's ships began to fail. Not crash fail, engines that stopped working, maps that led nowhere, supplies that vanished, crews that forgot their orders. Nothing violent, nothing bloody, but everything was shaking. The Zark's empire still laughed on their shows. Their leaders still smiled. But behind closed doors they held long meetings. They checked every base, every soldier, every station. They knew something was happening. They just didn't know what or who. In a lab on Earth, Dr. Eleonora Blue looked at a new map. It showed points of light, each one a human action. At first they had been random, but now they had shape. Now they had flow. She touched the screen and whispered, "Good." She didn't mean good as in happy. She meant ready. Humans didn't rise all at once. They rose like a wave, slow, steady, strong. Across the stars, whispers grew into signs. Broken systems, vanished files, false signals, secret messages. And always, always, one simple word appeared again and again. At first, the Zark's empire thought the missing ships and broken machines were nothing. They blamed space storms, lazy workers, and old parts. They told their citizens not to worry. But behind closed doors, their leaders were not so calm. One of those leaders was General Skarn. He had sharp blue skin, metal plates on his arms, and 3 long scars across his left cheek. He was one of the oldest fighters in the Empire. He had never lost a battle. His job was to watch the border near human space. It used to be a quiet job, but now it felt different. Skarn sat in a cold, dark room full of screens. Each screen showed a different place: stations, ships, supply paths, moons, and colonies. One screen blinked red, then another, then 3 more. Each red light meant something had gone wrong. One station had shut down with no warning. One ship had changed course and vanished. One mining base had lost power. The numbers didn't lie. The general leaned back in his chair. His eyes narrowed. Something wasn't right. He called in his top officer, Captain Drex. Drex was young, fast, and proud. He always said humans were weak. He thought they were too soft to fight, too scared to plan. But Skarn didn't agree anymore. "Show me the full report," Skarn said. Drex gave him a file. It was thick and full of broken paths, lost signals, and systems that no longer worked. "Tell me," Skarn asked, "how many of these failures are near human zones?" Drex paused. "Almost all of them, sir." Skarn stood up. "That's not chance." The general had seen this kind of pattern before. Long ago, another enemy had tried something like this. Not with weapons, but with ideas, quiet attacks, small moves, distractions, lies. And then, when the time was right, a storm. But this time, it was humans doing it. Skarn frowned. "They are not weak, they are patient." Drex didn't believe him. "But they have no fleet, no warships, no armies. What can they do?" Skarn didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the window and looked out into space. "They're already doing it." All across the Empire, others started to notice. A Zark's trader named Elver was trying to move supplies to a base near Mars. His cargo vanished. He had used a safe path. No pirates, no storms, just silence. He called for help. No one came. On a cold moon near Saturn, a Zark's guard went to check a door that kept opening by itself. Inside, he found the storage room was empty. The cameras had been turned off, but something was left on the wall, a picture of a human face, drawn with fire soot. Under it, one word: watched. The guard shivered. In a science station near Pluto, a group of Zark's researchers were trying to build a new weapon, but every test failed. Every plan was leaked. They thought someone in the lab was a traitor. They began to fight among themselves. But no one was a traitor. The plans had been taken from outside, by someone who understood their systems better than they did. Skarn saw all these signs. He told the council, the main leaders of the Zark's empire. They laughed at him. "It's nothing," one counselor said. "It's dust and rumors." But Skarn didn't laugh. Dust can grow into a storm. Still, the council did not act. They believed in size, they believed in fear. They thought the humans would stay quiet. After all, Earth had not sent a message. No threats, no warnings, just shadows. But maybe that was the message. Skarn went back to his war table. He placed markers on each point of failure. Each dot made a shape. It looked like a net, a slow, careful trap. He whispered to himself, "This is not revenge. It's a plan." Back at the fleet headquarters, another strange thing happened. Ships reported that their maps had been changed. A few pilots got lost. Others ended up near empty stations that had once held human workers. But now the stations were dark, cold, quiet. Still, the pilots said they felt like someone was watching them. One pilot, named Yarrow, sent a final message before her ship disappeared. She said, "They're not gone. They're inside the walls." After that, silence. A group of Zark's scientists tried to find the source of these problems. They checked code, satellites, power lines, and ship records. They thought maybe the humans had created a virus, something to break systems without being seen. But they could not find the virus. They could not even find a single line of wrong code. Everything looked normal, but it acted broken. That made the fear worse. People in the Empire began to talk, first in whispers, then in full voices. Are the humans rising? Are they watching us? Will they strike? No one had answers. Shops near human space started to close. Traders stopped their routes. Some Zark's families left the colonies, too afraid to stay. They remembered the faces of the 10 humans the Empire had taken. Now they wondered who those people really were. They were not just victims. They were sparks, and the fire was growing. In the lower decks of a Zark's patrol ship, a young soldier found a note stuck to his locker. The note was in human writing, but he could read it. It said, "You took one of ours. We will take 10 of yours, but not lives, systems, power, control." The soldier ran to tell his commander, but when they came back, the note was gone. Now even the strong began to feel afraid. In the command room of a major station, alarms rang for 2 full minutes. All doors locked. Lights went out. When they came back on, every screen had the same words: "We are still here." No one knew how the message got in. No wires were touched. No codes were entered. It was like the station had spoken on its own. General Skarn called all high officers to a private meeting. He said, "You must see the truth. These are not accidents. These are warnings. This is the beginning of something large." The room was quiet. One officer asked, "What should we do?" Skarn did not blink. "We prepare, we listen, we stop underestimating humans." But most officers didn't agree. They still thought power was louder than planning. They believed the humans had no true strength. Skarn shook his head. You still don't understand. They don't need to destroy us. They only need to unmake us, one part at a time. In deep space, something even stranger happened. A fleet of Zark's cargo ships flew into a black field where their signals stopped. For hours they tried to call for help. Nothing worked. When they finally came out the other side, all their systems were wiped clean. All the cargo was gone, and no one had seen a single enemy ship. It was like the stars had swallowed them whole. Back on Earth, the humans were still silent. No celebrations, no parades. But everywhere, the work continued. Quiet people doing great things in secret. And in the halls of the Zark's empire, for the first time in years, real fear had begun to spread, not from explosions but from questions. How much do the humans know? How long have they been planning? How far are they willing to go? And worst of all, how do we stop something we cannot even see? General Skarn didn't have the answer. He only had one warning. If we wait too long, it will be too late. The cities on Earth were quiet. Lights glowed softly across tall buildings. People walked to work, sent their children to school, and cared for their homes. To many, life seemed normal. But deep underground, far from noise or sunlight, something important was happening. In a hidden room beneath a mountain, a group of humans sat around a long metal table. There were no reporters, no cameras, and no cheering crowds. No one clapped. No one smiled. This was not a time for joy. It was a time for answers. The room was cold and wide. The walls were thick. Machines lined the corners, blinking gently. Every person at the table had lost someone, a sister, a friend, a son, a wife, not to war, not to sickness, but to cruelty done by the Zark's empire. The woman at the front of the room stood slowly. Her name was Commander Helen Ray. She had gray in her hair and fire in her eyes. Her voice was low and strong. "We are not here for speeches," she said. "We are here for justice." The others nodded. Beside her sat Dr. Emilio Voss, a scientist with deep lines on his face. His daughter had been one of the 10 taken by the Empire. He had once built tools for peace. Now he was building something else. Next to him was Mara Jin, a former hacker who had disappeared for 5 years. No one knew where she had gone. Now she was back. She tapped on her tablet, showing maps, systems, and data flows. She had not returned to forgive. She had returned to finish what the Empire started. A soldier named Jason Thorne had brought the final report. It listed every attack, every lost ship, every broken system. He dropped it on the table. It made a heavy sound. "They wanted silence," he said. "Now they'll hear us." Commander Ray raised her hand. "We don't need noise. We don't need anger. We need focus. We win with minds, not with fire." And so the plan began. It was not simple, it was not fast, but it was smart. The first step, collect knowledge. The team broke into networks, satellites, and comms towers. They didn't destroy, they watched, they listened. They made maps of weak points in the Zark system, supply routes, fuel depots, and drone factories. They learned the Empire's timing, its delays, its favorite roads. Every pattern told a story. Every mistake was a door. The second step, build tools, but not tools that explode. Tools that change things. Tools that could shut down power with no fire. Devices that could make a whole fleet drift in silence. Machines that could move unseen. They used human creativity. They used things the Empire didn't believe in: art, rhythm, sound, emotion. Mara Jin created a signal that mimicked Zark's orders. She laughed as she sent it through a test satellite. They won't know it's us. They'll think it's their own people. The third step, train the quiet ones. Not loud fighters, not showy leaders. They picked people who were often ignored: janitors, cleaners, cooks, drivers. The ones who knew how to move without being noticed. These were the watchers. These were the hands of the plan. Each was trained to gather small pieces, an access code here, a map there. It didn't seem like much, but when placed together, the puzzle formed a weapon more powerful than any bomb. Jason led them. "We won't send you with guns," he said. "We'll send you with truth." Some had never fought before, but now they were part of something greater. In hidden labs, the scientists made cloaks that hid body heat, boots that left no prints, drones that looked like birds, cameras so small they could fit inside a pen. Earth had no empire, no giant fleet, no army of millions. But Earth had something better: purpose. The fourth step, test the plan. They chose a quiet moon where the Zarks kept a sensor base. No weapons, no guards, just computers that watched the stars. One night the base went dark. When the Zarks came to check, they found nothing missing except the records. All data gone, all history wiped. The lights still worked. The doors still opened, but the memory had been erased. It was a test, and it worked. The team smiled, not because they had hurt someone, but because they now knew their hands could reach anywhere. Still, they stayed hidden. The news on Earth barely spoke of it. Most people still believed peace was safe, and Earth's leaders let them believe that. Commander Ray said, "Let the people live. Let us carry the weight." More meetings were held in secret. More maps were drawn. The humans found the Empire's hunger for control made it blind. It had so many rules, so many eyes, it could not see what was missing until it was too late. A quiet man named Leo, who once repaired farming robots, designed a device that could turn Zark's ships against each other. He had once fixed fields. Now he was planting resistance. A girl named Sana, only 14, built a program that could speak Zark's language perfectly. It fooled a dozen systems. She said, "They never thought someone like me would matter." She mattered. Every day more people joined, not with weapons, but with purpose, with skill, with grief. Dr. Voss created a way to change space beacons, making ships think they were going one way when they were going another. He said softly, "Let them chase shadows." In the cold seas of Earth's northern coast, an underwater base was built. From there, signals could reach deep space without being traced. Mara lived there now. Her eyes never left the screens. She could see every Zark's move like a dance. She called it the pattern. "We follow the rhythm," she told Ray. "And when the beat changes, we strike." The team was growing, But still, they did not act loudly. Each move was slow, like a drop of water carving stone. Time was their weapon. They found weak links in Zark's trade. They found old tunnels under old colonies. They found workers angry at the Empire. Some even offered help. Quiet help. Help that left no fingerprints. In a lonely desert outpost, a Zark's engineer sent a message to Earth. Just 5 words. "I'm ready, tell me how." They did. Every time the Empire looked stronger, Earth became smarter. The Zarks had size. Earth had unity. The Zarks had fear. Earth had memory. Each leader around the table knew they might not live to see the final moment. But that didn't matter. They were not doing this for medals. They were doing it for the 10. The 10 who had been taken. Their names were spoken at the start of every meeting. Isla, Tom, Jenna, Raffi, Leigh, Brooke, Martin, Evie, Kay, and David. No last name, just names. They did not want the world to forget. A day came when the team saw a new sign. A Zark's warship had started scanning random areas of deep space. They were searching. They knew someone was moving. Commander Ray stood up in the war room. "They're looking good." Jason smiled. "They're scared." Mara tapped her screen. "Then we move faster." Back on Earth, the sky was still peaceful. But deep underground, in quiet labs, hidden tunnels, silent bunkers, and cold rooms, the plan was moving. Earth had not fired a shot, but it had changed the stars. The Zarks thought they ruled the galaxy. But now they would learn something else. You cannot rule what you do not understand. And Earth, small, hurt, silent Earth, was becoming something new. Not an empire, not a kingdom, but a promise. A promise that no pain would be forgotten. A promise that the smallest voice could still be heard. A promise that no one would ever mock a human again, without facing the plan born beneath the mountain. And as the plan grew, so did the silence. A silence full of fire. The stars above looked the same. The planets still spun. The ships still moved between moons. On the surface, nothing seemed different. But below, deep in the shadows of space, the real story was changing. Earth had begun its quiet reply. It didn't begin with noise. There were no big blasts or bright lights, no loud speeches or giant fleets. It started with a whisper, small and sharp. On a cold morning, a Zark's outpost went silent. It was a supply center on the edge of their space. No alarm was heard. No trace was found. The workers inside woke up and found their systems locked. Every screen flashed a simple line: "Leave now. This is your warning." They laughed at first. They thought it was a prank, but their doors wouldn't open. Their ships wouldn't fly. Their food did arrive, and their leader had no way to call for help. One by one, they packed up and left. The humans had not touched a single weapon, but they had taken everything that mattered. Then another base went dark. This one held fuel tanks for small ships. It was supposed to be protected. But overnight, every tank showed empty. The guards stood in shock. They had no idea what had happened. The human plan had been quiet, fast, and exact. No one saw the team that did it. No one heard the steps they took. Soon messages started to spread across Zark's channels. "Something's wrong. Why are the docks closed? Where are the ships? But no one could answer. The more they searched, the less they found. That's because Earth wasn't leaving signs. Earth was leaving fear. A station near a trade route was next. The Zarks sent 12 soldiers to check. Only 3 returned, not because they were hurt, but because they were confused. The lights inside the station had flickered. Then the power shut off. When it came back, all the data was missing. It was like the station had been erased. Even the air smelled different. One soldier whispered, "I don't know who they are, but they were already inside." Meanwhile, Earth's small teams kept moving. Each one was trained to act without being seen. They wore light armor, soft boots, and faces covered by simple masks. Some of them had once been teachers. Others had been drivers, cooks, or tech helpers. They weren't famous. They weren't known. That's what made them powerful. They didn't aim to destroy. They aimed to stop. When they entered a building, they left nothing broken. They just flipped the right switch. They pressed the right button. They sent the right code. They knew how to pause a machine without smashing it. They could turn off heat, stop food drops, or close gates. The Zarks called them ghosts. But they were not ghosts. They were humans with a mission. In one Zark's mine, deep under a red moon, the workers were cruel to their own. They forced others to dig without food or rest. One night the gate opened, and all the guards found themselves locked in their own cells. A single human stood at the center. He said nothing. He just left behind a note. It read, "No more chains." The freed workers walked away. The mine never opened again. As word spread, something strange began to happen. Some Zark soldiers dropped their weapons and refused to fight. "I don't want to vanish like the others," one said. "They don't kill, but they don't need to." On another planet, a tall tower stored Empire records. It had guards and thick doors. But one morning, every screen inside the building showed the same picture, the faces of the 10 humans the Zarks had taken. Underneath it were just 3 words: "We did not forget." A pilot in orbit received a signal that made her screen flicker. She stared as her flight system shut off and a soft voice filled the room: "Turn back or float forever." Her ship started to spin, powerless. Then, without warning, power returned, but she was pointed the other way. The humans had sent a warning. Not with pain, but with control. Back on Earth, the war room watched all of it unfold. Commander Ray stood by the main map, eyes locked on red dots turning gray. "Another post left empty," a young officer said. "They're running." Dr. Voss leaned forward. "They expected bombs, but we gave them silence." Mara Jin smiled. She had traced hundreds of Zark's messages filled with panic. "They can't trace us. They don't even know who to blame." Earth's plan was working. But they didn't stop. They kept moving. At a spaceport near the Empire's edge, traders found their money systems frozen. Every account showed 0. No one could buy, sell, or fly. They searched for answers, but the system had no error. The humans had left a single symbol on every screen, globe showing Europe, Africa. The traders were angry. The guards were confused, but no one could fix it. Across the stars, one by one, the Zarks lost control. They tried to replace parts. They tried to build walls, But each time Earth was faster, Earth was quieter, and Earth was already there. A young boy in the Empire's school found a chip in his books. When he touched it, it showed the truth. Pictures of the 10 humans who had been taken. He showed his friends. They passed it around. It spread like wind. In less than a week, thousands of young Zark citizens began asking questions. Why did we hurt them? Why do they want silence? Why do they know more than us? The leaders of the Empire met in fear. One stood up and shouted, "We have ships, we have weapons." Another shook his head, "But we can't find the enemy, we don't know where to strike." One of them whispered, "What if they're inside this room already?" That's when they stopped shouting. The fear had begun to grow. In one of the largest Zark cities, a bridge shut down, not with fire, but with light. Thousands of lights danced in the sky, spelling out one name after another: Isla, Tom, Jenna, Raffi, Lay. People stopped to watch. The names were clear. The message was clear. Earth was not here to fight. Earth was here to make them remember. More stations emptied. More workers fled. Some even started to help the humans in secret. They passed along keys. They opened doors. They broke codes. The Empire had always ruled with fear. But now the people feared something else: truth. At the edge of a dark planet, a human team entered a power station. They did not take anything. They just replaced one battery with a special chip. That chip did not burn or harm. It sang a soft tone only humans could hear. When the Zark's engineers checked, everything looked normal. But from that day, every system they built played the same soft note. The note had no words, but it felt like a promise. Stop now or lose more. And more they lost. But Earth still did not cheer. The war room did not laugh. They moved forward with care. "We are not monsters," Commander Ray reminded them. "We don't want to destroy, we want to be heard." And they were. They were heard in quiet rooms, in broken halls, in drifting ships, in empty skis. They were heard without shouting. Because real power does not need to yell. And Earth's power had just begun. They didn't march, they didn't fire, they didn't crush. But one by one the stars stopped being safe for the Empire. The dark corners were no longer quiet. They were listening, and they were filled with a force the Zarks had never known. Memory, unity, and quiet strength. The kind that doesn't fade. The kind that waits. The kind that watches and never forgets. The Zark's empire had always believed they were the strongest force in the galaxy. They had more ships, more weapons, and more soldiers than any other empire. For years, they had ruled through fear. They controlled planets, crushed uprisings, and made others obey without question. But now, something strange was happening. Their power was starting to fade, and the humans were behind it. The humans had not started a war in the usual way. They didn't send out big ships or fire giant weapons. Instead, they used smart ideas. They moved quietly, stayed hidden, and made slow changes that most people didn't notice at first. One by one, outposts stopped working. Space stations lost power. Ships disappeared without a trace, and nobody knew how. The Zark's leaders were angry. They felt like they were being mocked. General Rax, the head of their war forces, stood in the middle of a dark command room. His red eyes glowed under the lights as he stared at the reports. He slammed his fist on the table. "We need to stop them now," he growled. "We will trap them." He and his commanders made a plan. They picked a small moon called Arta 9. It was far from the busy parts of space, quiet and rocky. It had deep caves and strange energy signals. The Zarks believed the humans had set up a hidden base there. They were sure it was being used to control some of the strange things happening in space. 10 large warships were sent to the moon. Each ship was filled with soldiers, machines, drones, scanners, and powerful tools. They were ready to fight and ready to win. The goal was simple: trap the humans, catch them in one move, and take back control. The ships flew fast across the stars, forming a circle around the moon. No one could enter. No one could escape. It was a perfect trap, or so they thought. When the ships reached the surface, everything looked quiet. There were no signs of life. No humans, no heat, no sounds. It was silent. At first, the Zarks thought the humans were hiding deep inside the caves. They sent machines to search underground. They scanned every part of the moon, but the deeper they looked, the less they found. There were no bases, no people, no machines, just empty space. General Rax was not pleased. He ordered his soldiers to check again. They searched the same areas over and over. They drilled into the rocks. They used heat sensors, motion detectors, and sound waves. Still nothing. It didn't make sense. "They were here," Rax muttered. "They must be hiding. We will keep looking." Then something strange happened. One of the ships lost power for just a second. Lights blinked, screens flickered. It seemed small at first, but then another ship had the same problem, then another, and another. Soon all 10 ships were having problems. Screens turned black. Engines stopped working. Doors locked by themselves. Soldiers shouted and pushed buttons, but nothing worked. The main ship went silent. The lights went out completely. Only small red emergency lights stayed on. Pilots tried to send messages to each other, but their radios were dead. It was as if someone had taken over the entire fleet. Panic spread. Soldiers ran through the halls. Officers barked orders, but they were trapped inside their own machines. On every screen, a message appeared: "You stepped into your own trap." Everyone stared at the words in shock. Who had written this? Where was it coming from? How could it be on every ship at the same time? The truth was simple and terrifying. The humans had already been there. They had expected the Zarks to come. In fact, they had led them to Arta 9 on purpose. It was never a real base. It was bait. Weeks earlier, humans had placed special tools deep underground. These tools were silent and invisible. They did not send out any signals. They just listened and waited. When the Zarks landed, the tools woke up. They sent a secret code into the Zark systems. The code had been planted months ago when the Zarks weren't paying attention. It was hidden inside their machines, waiting for the right moment. Now the code was alive. It took over doors, lights, engines, computers, and even life support. The Zark soldiers couldn't open a single door. They couldn't move the ships. They couldn't even call for help. They were stuck. No weapons fired. No alarms screamed. There was no battle, just silence, red lights, and the sound of fear. General Rax stood in his command room, unable to move. The screens blinked again. Another message appeared. We don't need to shoot, we don't need to chase, we just wait. The message was calm, but it was filled with power. It was a clear warning. The humans were in control, and there was nothing the Zarks could do. The soldiers on board started to whisper. Some believed ghosts had taken over the ships. Others thought the machines were cursed. But none of them understood the truth. The humans had used planning instead of force. They had studied the Zarks. They had watched and waited. And now they had struck at the perfect moment. Back on Earth, human commanders watched everything from a control room. Their screens showed the 10 Zarks ships floating above Arda 9 like toys. They saw the panic. They heard the silence. But they didn't laugh or cheer. They were serious. This was not a joke. It was a message. They wanted the galaxy to see what happens when someone attacks Earth. Earth's leaders had not fired a single shot, but they had shut down 10 warships. It was the kind of power no one could see coming. It was quiet, it was careful, and it was complete. News spread fast. Traders talked about it. Miners whispered it. Even people in the Zark's empire began to hear rumors. The humans flipped the trap, they said. The hunters became the hunted. For 3 long days the ships stayed silent. The soldiers waited in the dark. They ate their food. They breathed the air. But they couldn't move. They couldn't talk to anyone outside. They could only stare at the message on the screen. Some tried to sleep. Others sat in corners and shook with fear. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything came back online. The lights turned on, the engines worked, the doors opened, radios beeped. One last message appeared: go home. The soldiers didn't ask questions. They didn't wait for orders. They left Arda 9 as fast as they could. They didn't fire a single shot. They didn't try to fight. They just left. The trap had failed. The Empire had failed, and they all knew it. Back in the command halls of the Zarks, leaders sat in silence. Their best plan had turned into their worst mistake. Their ships were fine, but their pride was broken. Their trust in their machines was gone. Their fear of humans had just begun. The humans had made one thing clear: Earth was not weak. It was not small. It was not to be messed with. And from that day on, the galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again.